pose with this face.
That's my camera, baby. It's worth more than your life, Tasha.
Everything's shaking.
Yeah, it's not as good as this.
I can leave it.
No, what are you gonna say? What are you gonna say?
I know something.
Say it, yeah, say it.
Where are you from?
If someone tells fuck you, you respond with no thanks, they don't want to listen.
What?
Tell me fuck you.
Huh?
Tell me fuck you.
No, what?
Say fuck you. Good.
Fuck, like, I'm having recorded.
Oh, man.
Fuck you, Phil.
Respond. I know the guys who he does not have a shit. The only fuck you get is to read it.
You get acting for men.
At least he gets. I think the monkeypox is a fucking needle.
You don't want monkeypox. I mean, you probably got monkeypox already. Your face looks like it. Oh, there's too many people there. Have to say.
Your right hand gets more action than your red sheet.
Are you like working? What are you doing?
Try to make a report for bioprocessing.
Oh.
Anyone who is that
Theory can only get you so far. Great man, J. Robert Oppenheimer. It should be, man. The labs get worse next semester.
for next semester you have microbiology, molecular biology lab.
Is there space in the room?
So there, first time in my life I'm seeing this in fact. We have molecular biology and genetics lab.
Yeah. Good.
Just make sure that you don't let Shayuja ma'am do your experiment for you. In that case, you might as well stick with it. You have my manual. I don't have.
Are you going to sit here or relax?
I'm going to get my lab. milkshake flavored bread.
That's not strawberry. That's not strawberry. You wouldn't know. Have you ever eaten sugary bottle?
Okay, what the fuck is my laptop doing?
Oh, I don't know. Sounds like an Elton John. Sounds like an Elton John. You know about Elton John?
He would know considering the such yours.
I was gonna drop a your mom joke there, but I felt it was too unnecessary.
We could drop a your mom joke, but his mom was so heavy she dropped it.
You.
Tell her that. That's good to know.
Yeah. Apart from our BioMachines, I mean, that was like 20 years ago.
Considering I'm still 19 years.
I'm so proud of that.
He took me, but he was 1 year old. I'm 19.
Very nice. What did he? He's loving it. He's going 20 now. But he was in no way. I need to improve. If actually tomorrow we're all staying here to study up now. The fact that he actually pulled out his wallet and was like, "Please, it's mine."
I mean, you should know.
Even yesterday.
What the fuck?
It's your birthday? You didn't even know?
Bro, they got my birthday wrong.
Is that the birthday? Is that the birthday or the day you got the car?
They got the car.
Hey, I in the first speech, Anushka will essentially what she do, she put into Kanye West's picture after the whole okay? Both of you roll. Yeah.
What do you have to do?
She put Kanye West's picture. Just say, she'll ask for a boo or a boo. Boo. For Kanye West. Or a woo. If you like, you can say woo.
I'll do yesterday's song.
Yeah, but be very loud. Scream.
Also, take a model of that. I'll stick it when he comes. Okay. Good question. You have the answer. What is the picture? Fuck the picture. And see the you know you believe me? I hope not. Because today's schedule is work at 2 a.m. Go home and tomorrow same day. Also they're gonna be there at 2 to I'll celebrate after. No? Quite serious, 100%. Lighting need to change. Lighting.
Greetings to the August gathering present here. I, Srinath, Head of Talks at Blank101, take the immense honor to be hosting today's event titled Senses 101. A mind-numbing journey into the very essence of our existence and how our senses can propel us, deceive us, and how the absence of our senses leads to chaos and drama. The stories we have for you this evening will make you ponder, rethink your reality, and look at this fascinating blue ball floating in space called Earth in a different view. Be prepared for your annual enlightenment as we take you on a roller coaster ride, exploring the senses we use to perceive this world. I take this opportunity to announce that this event is in collaboration with Manipal BioMachines, the one and only synthetic biology student project, pioneering research and bringing knowledge to the student community here at Manipal. Without further ado, we are Blank101, MIT Manipal's only public speaking club, and we proudly present to you Senses 101.
Kanye West. Can I get a boo or a woo? Woo! Okay, once again, Billie Eilish. Boo or a woo? And lastly, Vincent Van Gogh. What do you think they all have in common besides being being the most mentally stable people in pop culture? The answer is synesthesia. Synesthesia is a perceptual phenomenon wherein stimulation of one sensory or cognitive pathway brings about an involuntary experience in a secondary pathway. Basically, it's cross-wiring of the brain, which results in a permutation and combination of various feelings and pathways. Coming back to the questioning, what do you exactly taste when you look at this picture? Or what do you exactly smell when you look at this pattern? This is a question only 2 to 4% of the world can answer, and they have synesthesia. There exist different types of synesthesia, and they range from grapheme color synesthesia, wherein people can associate colors to letters and alphabets, all the way to mirror touch synesthesia, wherein seeing someone experience a feeling such as pain can also make them feel the same way, even though nothing is affecting them. Melissa McCracken, an artist based in the US, was tired of answering these questions. Melissa, if I touch your hand, do you feel pink or blue? Or Melissa, when you study science, you hear classical music or hardcore metal? I mean, to be fair, how exactly do you put such a peculiar neurological condition into words? She decided to take her country's #1 priority in mind and capitalize on this incredible ability to raise awareness about what synesthesia exactly is. She started by listening to pearly jazz, which invoke colors of gold and pearly iridescent hues, all the way to pop music, which were like bursts of purple and pink. Essentially, she could represent any song in the form of a visually appeasing painting to get us thinking on a similar wavelength. Think about how, if any of you guys had synesthesia, how differently you could perceive your world. Imagine boring mess food, but with a cascade of melodious notes in the background. Or having the ability to correlate any one of your engineering concepts to the spatial surroundings. Absolutely mind-boggling, right? Synesthetes have long been drawn to the arts, where they harness their synesthetic abilities to create truly fascinating pieces of art. Artists like Kanye West, Billie Eilish, and Vincent van Gogh have long used their synesthetic abilities to create the groundbreaking pieces of art we all know. Kanye West here, for example, speaks about how his synesthesia helps him create the songs and album covers we all know. He speaks about how music evokes vivid colors and images in his mind. Yeah, his mind truly a specimen to be studied about. He speaks about how synesthesia helps with his creative direction, where he created album covers such as My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, which features a surreal and otherworldly landscape, which he associates with the intricate imagery he feels through his music. Billie Eilish, on the other hand, is known for a dark and moody atmosphere, often associated with horror and gory visuals. She uses her synesthetic abilities to create her artistic vision and create famous songs such as Bad Guy, which featured an industrial and gritty music undertone, which she associates to the intense and raw emotions she feels through her lyrics. Besides artistic abilities, synesthetes have added a completely new dimension in the world of scientific discovery. Several prominent figures have used their synesthesia to create equations and subjects we all dread but are also equally thankful for. Nikola Tesla, for example, often described experiencing flashes of light and hearing sounds that corresponded to certain frequencies. Maybe his love for pigeons was associated to synesthesia, which helped him create the unconventional ideas we all apply in today's world. It is speculated that he used his synesthesia to create designs and visualize complex electrical systems in his mind. Yeah, if we were able to do that, BE and BD would be the subjects we least cried about. Take a minute to think that if you had synesthesia, how drastically you could impact the field that you are in right now. Yeah, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but just because you related this interstellar background music to space movie thrillers does not mean you guys have synesthesia. Some of us might try to relate this to the background songs we listen to any movies, wherein music that contains notes lower on the scale, accompanied with minor chords, make us feel negative and sad, whereas high-paced, energetic music makes us feel happy. This is only because that increases our heart rate, which gets us feeling excited and exhilarated. So there is no synesthesia here at play, but there is other phenomenon such as emotional contagion. The music evokes emotional responses in us by directly affecting our psychological status. So yeah, when you guys go back to your respective food courts, do not break your mind trying to connect the food you eat to various sensations and sounds. Instead, let's just learn to appreciate the marvelous wonders of the world of synesthesia. Thank you.
Just because you cannot explain something doesn't mean it isn't true. This was precisely the case with Paul Stammers. Let me set the stage. Paul was just a regular old teenager going to Evergreen State College. While on the other hand, his elder brother, who went to Yale, had a graduate scholarship from the University of Washington in neurophysiology. Paul lived his carefree life in Columbiana, Ohio, when his brother was then at college. One summer, Paul's brother comes back home and presents him with a book, Altered States of Consciousness. Being the 14-year-old he was, coupled with curiosity and admiration towards his brother's work, Paul decides to borrow this book, which was also his brother's textbook. He was fascinated by it. Jo tera hai wo mera hai is a common phrase between best friends. But therefore, Paul's best friend, a guy called Ryan Snyder, decides to borrow this book. Paul says yes. A few days pass, a week passes, 2 weeks pass, and Ryan still hasn't returned the book. Paul starts getting anxious. My brother will be soon leaving for college and I need to get this book back. He starts pestering Ryan to return the book, but Ryan just hesitantly says, my dad burnt the book. I know, right? Why would he do it? Well, fast forward a few years, Paul is now living in Olympia, Washington, in a mountain cabin in Darrington Hills. His belief, blending academia with hard work. He spends days in his cabin, conducting research and chopping wood by the side. Oh, and remember the book from earlier? Well, shout out to Ryan's dad. The burnt book only ignited a flame in Paul's mind, hurling him deep into the study of psychedelics. So, one day, Paul gets a random phone call from his elder brother, and the conversation went something like this. I have found soul-side mushrooms. It could be an unknown species. Oh, and yes, please come to Seattle ASAP. It could be a great trip. Guys, disclaimer, please, please, please do not consume random mushrooms off the street. Forget a bad trip. You might end your trip here on Earth altogether. Okay, coming back to the story. The mushrooms had purple-brown spores and his skin burned a bright blue color. The funny thing is, Paul's brother discovered this rare, one-of-a-kind mushroom growing in the thousands on a pile of wood chips next to a random bus stand. What does one do when they have a rare and one-of-a-kind mushroom which hasn't been even accounted to in scientific literature? Well, of course, you collect 8 to 10 shopping bags full of it. Paul and his brother decide to take these mushrooms home and try to test them out. They make smoothies out of it due to its low potency. Again, guys, disclaimer, do not try this at home. The Titanic sank on her maiden voyage and you could too. After experiencing a relatively good trip and seeing unknown hallucinations in the company of his brother's neurophysiology friends, Paul decides to go to sleep. But that's when the bad trip started. Lucid dreaming. Calling it a nightmare would be an understatement because Paul saw the end of the world. It was as if the Reagan administration of the time joined hands with the USSR nuclear conflict to create a potent concoction at global destruction. Paul saw a battered planet and he predicted the world's end a week from then. By the end of this horrific, horrendous dream, he remembered a peculiar yet vivid scene. Thousands of dead cattle lying in the sun. Paul woke up from this trance and immediately went and told his friends. 1st December 1975, Paul predicts the end of the world, was jokingly penned down on their calendar. But the following week saw a strange turn of events. There was rampant snowfall, and what followed this was an erratic rise in temperature. The melting snow caused the rivers to swell, and there was heavy flooding. Paul was dumbfounded. He was determined to travel 70 miles all the way back to his cabin in Darrington Hills just so that he could retrieve his manuscripts and years of research, because who would believe him if he had no evidence? This was a risk that was crucial to take. Paul was stuck in that cabin for 2 whole days. The river that flowed nearby had swollen up so much so that it was a mere 12 feet away from his dwelling. As the skies cleared, Paul decides to head back home. On his ride back, he sees a clearing in the forest. As he looks down into the horizon, that's where he sees it. Tens and thousands of dead cattle lying in the scorching sun. Coming back to what I started with, just because you cannot explain something doesn't mean it isn't true. Would you believe in Paul's dream? Thank you.
What if I told you there was a man who mistook his wife for a hat? Yes, you heard me right. This man literally tried to lift his wife up a chair thinking she was his hat, an inanimate object. Although this was a fictional piece written by Oliver Sacks, this is, however, a very real-life condition which can make people see the world in the most bizarre, tragic and downright jaw-dropping ways. We are diving into a medical condition that sounds like it was cooked up in the writer's room of a psychological thriller. However, it is very real and it's called Capgras delusion. Not this delusion, but Capgras delusion, which, by the way, is a psychological condition where you believe that the people around you have been replaced with imposters, doppelgangers, body doubles, call it what you want. But in your mind, your loved ones have been infiltrated and you are the only one that sees it. Here's a little history of this condition. Now, when we tread back to late 20th century of France, Madame M could have sworn that she was married to 80 different men. Not 18, but 80. 80 different men. All somehow eerily looking identical, but different. Something was off. She was heartbroken, to say the least, since to her, the one man she truly cared about, her one true love, the one that she married, was long lost into the distant realms of her own reality and wasn't going to come back. She believed with every fiber of her being that her husband had been abducted or worse, murdered, and in his place were a series of imposters. Now, this might sound like the plot of
रब ने बना दी जोड़ी, but trust me, this gets better. Now, into the next part of her life entered a psychologist, the police, and a lawyer. When Joseph Cabras first heard her out, she claimed that out of her 5 children, 3 of them had been abducted and replaced with a dying infant. And out of the other 2, one of them grew into healthy adulthood. However, the last one, unfortunately, was fatally poisoned. As Cabras listened, the sense of dread grew. He couldn't decipher if this was a case of unimaginable cruelty or if he was at the brink of unraveling the biggest conspiracy ever conceived. And as for Madame M, well, she would go on to file cases of abduction and, of course, divorce. It was theorized that while Madame M could technically recognize the faces of her loved ones, her brain, however, didn't elicit the same emotional response, leading her to believe that they must all be imposters. What happened to Madame M? Well, that is a question that remains unanswered to this day. But if her story piqued your interest, and if you, like me, are a movie enthusiast, you should definitely check out Goodnight Mommy. This movie follows the story of 2 twins, Lucas and Elias, both of who are convinced that their mommy isn't their real mother but a sinister imposter. Well, there is good reason because she comes back home with her face covered in bandages after a cosmetic surgery. Suspicion grows into obsession as they try to expose her. All these cases showcase the brain's ability to create such a twisted reality. And it's not just an odd quirk, it's a glimpse into how our brains work, or sometimes how they just don't. Capra's delusion is the ultimate test of object permanence. It's a haunting spiral of grief and delusion where the real horror is what the mind refuses to accept. Thank you.
11 p.m. It was exactly 11 p.m. when a friend of mine calls and asks me, Meena, would you like to give a speech for the MBMX Blank101 collab? Well, hold that thought, because here I am, geeky. Now diving into the actual part, picture this. Your brain is a superhero carrying a ridiculously high-tech Polaroid camera. It's nothing exactly to brag about until in a few neurological disorders, which I rather prefer referring to them as conditions than disorders, your brain actually goes into its superhuman mode. Well, that's probably the reason why our biochemistry professor prefers to call us as chemical soup rather than actual human beings. Take people with hyperthymesia. They have such an advanced brain camera that they can take pictures of the moment and also add to its soundtrack. Guess what? They can store the smell as well. If you had hyperthymesia, you'd be like, oh, I remember the exact flavor of that pineapple pizza from 2016. Or an insane Maggie loaded to the brim with ketchup like so, which my weird friend absolutely loves, by the way. Well, you out there, if you had hyperthymesia that is, are remembering such teeny tiny dates. Your friends are still trying to figure out where they left their keys. Or probably counting the number of bunks they have left in a 3-credit course. While your brain may not be able to do all this in its normal mode, when it actually becomes superhuman, it's like having the coolest, quirkiest camera that even puts the most die-hard photo collectors to shame. Quite fascinating, right? Meet Stephen Wiltshire, the human camera. You might know him, and for those of you who don't, it's like his brain has a record button and then his hands immediately hit the print button. This man took a helicopter ride over the New York City, glanced at the skyline, and drew the entire cityscape from memory. You heard that right? From memory. Well, every bridge, every window, every skyscraper, every complex captured with stunning precision. Now, that is superhuman, right? Here's a little tidbit of information you might not know. This dude right here is Daniel Tammet. He is the exact legal legend who could probably win the presidential debate. Rumor has it that once he was up in court against Microsoft, and he was so convincing that even Windows was questioning its own existence. Alright, I cooked that story up. But, coming to actuality, he has a photographic memory and he can remember the exact page, every text, and any legal exhibit to ever exist in the history of the United States of America. I mean, colleagues attribute his courtroom success to this ability of his. I mean, of course, right? Well, where was I? Okay. Now envision, one morning, you wake up from your slumber and you have this insane talent of playing piano like Mozart, or painting like Monet, or even solving calculus without a calculator. Forget without a calculator, quicker than a calculator like Shakuntala Devi, without any previous training. Pretty much a superhero origin story, right? That is savant syndrome for you. The neurological condition that turns ordinary people into walking, talking geniuses. It's like the brain is saying, neglect the fundamentals, let's skip to the cooler stuff. You can crank out the piano like Beethoven's Furies, like all along you've known what a C note is? Well, speaking of savant syndrome and super talents, meet Sean. Okay, not this Sean, Dr. Sean Murphy from The Good Doctor. This fella isn't a surgeon, he's a savant. And a surgeon. Trying to navigate through social cues, one moment he's awkwardly figuring out how small talk works, and then the next, he enters into an emergency room completely filled with chaos, and he can visualize the human body as though it were a 3D blueprint. The most famous scene would be where Sean enters the OR, completely distorted, and he calmly utters, "There is a blood clot 20 centimeters below the clavicle, 3 centimeters to the right, diagonal." Bang! Diagnosis is done while half of us are still figuring out where the clavicle is. Isn't it as though his brain has Google Maps for the human body and he also has a Save His Life button? Forget about the OR. Sean, or Dr. Murphy to be more professional, is still trying to figure out how small talk works. Isn't it as though his brain took it upon itself that the surgical skills are maxed out, yet the chit-chat is still left at level 1? Speaking of savant syndrome, the real-life human who possesses the most arguable example of this is Daniel Tammet. This man here memorized pi up to 22,514 digits, if I'm right. Fun fact, I took quite time to learn this 5-digit number. I mean, it's very impressive. Well, when it comes to mind-blowing abilities, whether it's playing sheet music, whether it's playing symphonies without sheet music, or memorizing entire cities and legal texts, then next time before you say, brain not braining much, remind yourselves about these real-life superheroes and how our brains are chemically wired in this whole different way. I mean, chemical soup, right? Well, now that I've convinced you superpowers aren't only a phenomenon of occurrence in comic books, and that some neurological conditions can turn human beings into something quite out of a superhero movie, why do we need X-Men when our neurons are already working overtime? In a nutshell, humans every day do become superhumans. Why do we need a cape when our brain has got its own ultimate upgrade? Thank you.
Let me take you back about 30 years to a high school biology class. The teacher is discussing certain experiments regarding a widely used cell line called HeLa. Nothing unusual, right? Just a teacher droning on and on about a bunch of immortal cells. But for one student, Erica Johnson, this leads to a moment of pure shock. Wait, she thought. Hold on. Did she just say Henrietta Lacks? Because guess what? Henrietta was her great-grandmother. Can you imagine sitting there in biology class, doing your lab work, and suddenly realizing that you're holding your great-grandmother's cells? I'm pretty sure she must have thought something along the lines of, wait, so do I need her permission to do this? Now, let's talk a little bit about these cells that Erica was holding and why they've been in more labs than some actual scientists. In 1951, Henrietta Lacks, a 31-year-old African-American woman, walked into Johns Hopkins Hospital with cervical cancer. During her treatment, doctors took a little sample of her tumor and ran some tests on it. And what they found was astonishing. While normal cells are like us, they work, they get tired, and eventually call it quits, Henrietta's cells were the complete opposite. Oh no, they were the marathon runners of the cellular world. They never stopped, never got tired, and never asked for a day off. Basically, the cells you'd hire if you ran your own startup. Scientists were thrilled. So, they named them HeLa, short for Henrietta Lacks, and started flying them all around the world. By now, if there were a frequent flyers program for cells, HeLa would definitely have platinum status. These cells were used to find a cure for polio. They helped advance cancer research, and they were also flown to space. Yeah, space. Meanwhile, here I am, still too lazy to walk from my hostel block to AB5. Now, you must be thinking this story is all sunshines and rainbows, right? Something along the lines of, wow, Henrietta has helped save millions of lives. But here's where things get a bit awkward. The doctors who took Henrietta's cells, well, they didn't exactly ask for her permission. No please, no, hey, is this okay with you? Just a thanks for the cells, we'll take it from here. It wasn't until the 1970s, almost 2 decades after Henrietta's passing, that the Lacks family was made aware of the situation. Can you imagine that phone call? Hey, just a heads up, your mom's cells are still alive. And by the way, we've been flying them all around the world, curing all sorts of diseases. I bet the Lacks family had questions like, so where's our cut of the Nobel Prize money? Now, here's where the ethical questions come in. Can we really borrow someone's cells without their permission, even if it leads to amazing scientific breakthroughs? It's kind of like borrowing your roommate's snacks, isn't it? You know it's wrong, but they're right there, and you're starving. And the next thing you know, your roommate's standing there asking, hey, where'd my chips go? And all you can find yourself saying is, I don't know. But here's the problem. The Lacks family did not even know these chips were being taken from them, let alone that they were saving humanity. And these chips, since then, have been commercialized. Millions of dollars were made from HeLa cells. Meanwhile, Henrietta's family was not able to even afford proper health care. Let that sink in. The Lacks family did not have access to the very things that Henrietta had helped make possible. Henrietta's case helped bring much needed attention to informed consent. So now, whenever you walk into a hospital, you're handed all these fancy forms that no one actually reads before signing. You know the ones that say, sure, take my blood, take my cells, take my future firstborn child. I just need to be out of here ASAP. But hey, at least they're asking for your permission before borrowing pieces of you for the next big medical discovery. Baby steps, right? Henrietta's case also helped bring much needed attention to the way medical research was being conducted. It isn't about the incredible discoveries that Hella helped make possible. It was also about who was rewarded and compensated for these discoveries. Henrietta did not volunteer herself to find the cure for polio or to be the MVP of space-bound cellular research, but without her, a lot of these advancements might not have been possible. Meanwhile, the Labs family was left out of the loop for years, with not a penny in their hand from the revenue that was generated. So, the next time you hear about a new medical advancement or you get your flu shot taken, take a moment to thank Henrietta. Because her cells are still out there, living, dividing, and making our world a better place. And let's be honest, they're doing more in a petri dish than we have done in our entire lives. Thank you.
Well, that concludes all of our talks today. My friends and I were talking about something and we came to the realization, sensors are really cool. Sensors bring so much to life. And while it also led me to another thought, what would we be without those senses? Imagine not being able to see colors. Imagine jumping onto your bed and not being able to feel the mattress. Or imagine waking up one day from that exact mattress and then not being able to smell the morning coffee. That is a real issue. But turns out we don't have to worry about any of that. But it is a horrifying thought, and this horrifying thought could one day become a reality. Which is why we at Manipal BioMachines sat together and thought we would come up with Project Copy. What is Copy, you might ask? We're trying to figure it out as we go, but then it's essentially trying to sustain the yield of coffee. What do I mean by this? What I mean by that is basically coffee is dying, and it is true. It is dying, and we're trying to fix that. How are we fixing it? What is the problem? Turns out there's this fungi in coffee that's wreaking havoc. It's like absorbing all the nutrients and stuff. But yeah, let's not get into the science side of it. But it's dying, and the reason it is dying is because of this fungi. So we at Manipal BioMachines, we are a synthetic biology student project, and we decided, let's try to get rid of this fungi. We don't know what this fungi does. Whoa! Mike does interesting stuff, interesting sense indeed. Anyways, so what we decided to do was get rid of this fungi. We don't know what this fungi does. Maybe this fungi could give you a nice, lovely trip, but then it could, like one of the other fungi, but then like we didn't want to deal with that. We wanted to deal with eliminating it. We wanted to hear the clinks and clanks, the sounds of the coffee being brewed. We wanted to ensure that we see our lovely coffee in the morning. We wanted to ensure that the sensation of coffee is always with us. And that's why we decided to undertake this project. And the thing is, the project doesn't start or end with Manipal BioMachines. It's with all of us. It's with our collaborators in Blank101 here, and it is with every single one of you here. How you might ask, how you might be asking, because all of us consume coffee. All of us are part of this journey. And the little thing that we ask of you is to go onto our Instagram page, follow us, but then something more that you could do beyond just that is fill out a survey form, because that truly makes a difference. That's it from us, and you guys have been a sensational crowd. And on behalf of both Blank101 and Manipal BioMachines, goodbye, have a great day, and stay curious.
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending the event. The event is concluded. You may now proceed to the nearest exit. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for attending.